Want to learn to create your own garden? Stay tuned for the Poppy Fields video featuring peyote stitch and a ton of beads. If you need any materials, click on the links below the video in the description to shop with us online. To get started, we need to make this into this. This is our peyote base that we're going to be working with and embellishing. This peyote base is going to be 8 wide as we're working with it. And the nice thing is you don't see it a ton. We're using 8 Miyuki seed beads. And if you know peyote, great. If you don't, I'm going to teach you right now. So the first thing I'm going to do is put a stop bead on some 0.006 wildfire beading thread here. And this stop bead's eventually going to come off the project. I'm going to add 8 beads total, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And we're going to let that drop down next to our stop bead. This is going to be, again, the base that we're doing, and it's just simple peyote. If you need a little bit of help with peyote, you can watch that video as well. Once we have those 8 beads on, we're going to add 1 more bead. We're going to skip over bead 8 and turn our thread so we're sewing back towards the stop bead. Skip over 8 and sew through bead number 7. Bring that needle out. Skip over bead 6 and sew through bead number 5. Adding a bead to sit there in the peyote. Skip over 4, add a bead, sew through bead number 3. And you can see how this is just setting up that whole baseline for your piece. Add a bead, skip over 2, sew through bead number 1. So every time you do another row now, you're going to be adding 4 beads in this beautiful kind of honey color of the topaz. Add a bead now, and you can see those beads that are sticking up that you're automatically going to sew into. So you add a bead, come back the opposite direction, sew through the bead sticking up. Add a bead, look for the next bead that's sticking up, sew through. Add a bead, look for the next one sticking up, sew through. Add a bead, and sew through. So this is now 4 rows done. Row number 1 that we did with 8 beads is actually the first 2 rows. So we now have 4 rows done. Time to continue on and make it the length of your wrist, setting up and getting this bracelet ready to embellish. Once you have your base completed, we're going to start here with our poppies. They're going to be the center of our piece and they're going to be our focus, so that's what I want to start with. Generally speaking, when I do the embellishment, I'm going to start with the largest beads and then work my way down, filling in with the smaller beads and getting that look. So I also have my big ladybugs here that will be getting added after the sunflowers. So these are sunflower beads. We're going to make them look like the center of our poppy. So they have a hole that goes through the side here, which we're going to use to attach them onto the bracelet. At the same time, we're going to use our 15 O's, and those are in the dyed semi-frosted transparent olive, along with some 4mm bicones in crimson. So I'm sewing back through the piece on a diagonal through that last section basically of my peyote stitch, and I'm going to add in my sunflower. So my sunflower again is a little wide, and what I'm going to do for this first one is just kind of center it since it's the first one. I'm looking where the bead is coming out of the peyote strip and looking where the thread comes out, and I'm just going to tuck through another bead that's about the width here and lay that right on top of the bracelet. From here, I'm going to go back through the design to keep it centered, or back through the bead rather, to keep it centered, and then back through the thread past that I'm currently coming out of. That's how I'm going to lock that and embellish that into place. Coming out here then, I'm going to add some leaves basically of my poppies. So I'm going to use 2 of my 15 O's, then I'm going to use 1 and 2 and 3 of my crystals, followed by 2 more 15 O's. We're going to make this into a little leaf section here. So I'm going to go over to the next bead basically. When you're looking around that sunflower, what's the next bead? I'm going to skip over the next bead and sew into the next one in line. So I'm skipping over the next bead down in the next peyote row. pulling this tight and making sure when it's sitting, as we add these around, this is our first row, that they're going to sit in that nice little triangle section. So if I pull it up there, you can see. Once again, then we're going to go around the whole piece doing this, 1, 2, and then 1, 2, and 3. Look at your peyote stitch, whichever one you're coming out of, skip the next one, and go into the next bead along the line. And that's going to get you your next little petal of your poppies. See how they're sitting kind of around the piece here? I'm going to continue going around, adding in more of my petals around the poppies, and then we're going to do one more row around to really make that pop, adding in another crystal along the sides. So I'm finishing up my last set here of my little poppy petals. And I ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of those poppy petals. And notice how they kind of go every which way. They're going off the bracelet. That's perfect. I want it to look realistic. So coming off here now, what I'm going to do is add 1, 2, and 1 of my crystals, and then 1, 2 seed beads. We're going to fill in these gaps in the middle with just our single seed bead. So we're going to go in here and basically put this right on the interior, right around our piece. So look at your piece, add those in, and then simply sew through the next peyote bead. I often find it easiest as you're creating and designing to take your thread to the back of the piece and then figure out how it's going to come to the front. Just put it through the front. That's often going to be the easiest way to achieve going through the peyote stitch without too much headache. So I kind of sew through where I need to go, adding 2 beads, and then look there. So down through the piece, put your crystal where you want it to go, and then look through and see where you need to bring it up next. Bringing up on the peyote stitch. So I'm going to go through now, adding in 2 15s, 1 crystal, followed by 2 15s, going in and adding that crystal to sit right in the middle, basically, of your poppy leaf that you've created. So after you go in and you add an individual little crystal in between each of your poppy flowers there, you can see how it really kind of starts to take shape. And that red is going to be even highlighted more once we go in and we add some green leaves and some of our daggers to the design as well. I'm going to skip over onto the piece, and I am going to create 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 total of my poppies. So I'm going to go over and repeat 5 more times those poppies before I get ready to add in some of my little designs here, like my little ladybugs and some of my flowers, as well as some of those leaves and daggers. To get to the next spot where I want to have that poppy, I'm simply going to take my thread and needle, sew along the peyote stitch to get it right along that outer edge. As I go through and work on this next poppy flower here, I want to keep in mind that I want them all to be a little bit different. So I've gone around just like I did here at the start. And with this one, I'm just going to put in my additional red beads every so often, maybe every other, just to give it a little bit of a difference. So that way they're different sizes and different thicknesses, just like a true field. So I've gone around, done the exact same thing that we did for the first one, and now modifying it just a little bit. I'll add just a couple of my red 4mm bicones, excuse me, rather than adding them wholly to every single project. I also wanted to point out, don't be afraid to use the side beads. As you go in and as I go ahead and create the poppies, I do want them coming off of this peyote strip. So I don't want them all to be in the exact middle. I want it to be very, very freeform. So be aware of that as you are creating and as you're adding in your poppies. Keeping every poppy a little bit different, I wanted to show you that I've increased a little bit from 2 beads to 3, and I'm using 4. Now I'm going to go back in and fill this in a little bit more. But I like the variation. It keeps it organic, it keeps it natural, so don't be afraid to branch out from the original 3 and 1. You can see I've changed it in the second, and now I'm changing it in the third power. flower, because all of them are going to be different in nature. So let's make them different on our bracelet. Once you have all your poppy flowers on, you'll be able to see that this is not a light bracelet. It's going to be a little bit on the heavy side. And I like the organicness of this Poppy Fields and that it's not super, super symmetrical. What we're going to do now is we're going to go in and fill it in. So to fill in all of the extra peyote stitch here, and I'm going to get to the point where we don't really see any of it. Got a couple ladybugs that are going to be in my field here, hopping around and looking at everything. So I think I'm going to put about 3 of those on, maybe a 4th one. I have some leaves that we're going to add in. And this is where you get to have fun with it. It's very much just that creative mind and happiness of where your thread comes out, that's where you add it. We're going to add some lighter colors in the check daggers, and I'm also going to be using some of the Potomac daisy spacers as well as brightening it up with some gold seed beads. So to begin, I'm going to get out all my materials, get ready with little piles, and we are going to do some happy stitching. You're going to end up noticing a lot of stitching kind of going on, that I flip the bracelet over, flip it from one side to the other, because that's going to be easier to see where your thread is going in and coming out. So go ahead and get out the rest of your materials. We're about to have a lot of fun. So I've got my pile of beads here, and you're going to have a lot of fun watching this transform. So I'm coming out of one of the sides of my pieces. I'm just going to pick up at random some seed beads, a leaf, some more seed beads. I have my gold 11-0s out here with my 15s and my olivine leaves. I'm just going to take my thread and needle and sew through somewhere on the peyote stitch. Pull that in nice and tight and repeat. Let's do 2 golds. I'll come through and do 1 of my greens. I'll do 1 of my daggers, a green, 2 golds, and then once again find somewhere else in the stitch, sew through. See how it's just going to kind of fill in everywhere here. I'm going to pick up 1 of my little spacers, sew that into the space. That's my little poppy buds going in and getting them in. You see how I took that 11-0, sewed through the top, and then brought it down again, adding a little bit more of that dark green. I want to add another 1 of my leaves, a couple more seed beads, and fill in this space again. So I'm really just being very free-form about this and very unintentional, other than the fact of where I'm going to add my ladybugs. So my ladybugs, she's going to live right down there. So I'm going to fill this in a little bit more on this section and then get ready to add her down in there right along the bracelet. To add my ladybug in, I have my thread coming out and I've added 2 seed beads there. Going down and connecting into one of the beads, I added 1 11-0 followed by 3 15-0s. I'm going to take my needle and thread then, just like we added the center flower for our poppies. That's how I'm adding the ladybug, so that it sits nice and in the middle there. Repeat and then sew down into the stitch. And that's going to get our ladybug to sit right along our poppy fields. As I sew, I'm going to try to bring these poppy petals so that they're 3-dimensional and having them sit up as I add more beads kind of underneath and around and decorate my field. So right before your very eyes, almost like a time lapse here, our garden is growing. You can see that I have those additional little flowers that my ladybugs are sitting around. I'm going to add a couple more ladybugs into the design. And basically, as you're creating and as you're making this garden, you can look and see how it's taking shape. Fill in where you feel like there needs to be more color pop. You can see I've really concentrated on some gold there, did more of the turquoise around the start here. I'll do some more gold down here to even it out. And I like that I have all kinds of different things coming off the design. So my goal really is when it's sitting down that you don't see any of these 8-0 seed beads as you're creating and continuing to build your garden here in your poppy field. Because there's so many different ways to add beads, to loop beads, to go around, I thought I would show you a little bit of how I'm going to get around the side of this poppy, lifting it up just a little bit and adding more beads. So I'm coming out here of a seed bead that's actually below one of the stitches. I'm going to add some more of my green 15-0s. These are my big bead that I'm utilizing here, 2 gold and maybe 2 more of my green. I'm going to randomly come over here to this bead, come on out. And the nice thing with adding thread, if you've had to do so, is you will realize, as my thread wants to get caught around my tube, that you really can't see it. So I'm going in there, I have that grouping there of beads that just got carried over. I'm going to add another grouping of those beads while I'm working with them. And I'll do 3 of my green, 1 gold, 2 of my green. And just go right next to it and create a loop. Looping those around the edge there. So you can see they just are looped right in there. Coming out there, I'll say, sure, let me add a little bit more of that turquoisey color. That'll be a nice addition. Adding green, gold, turquoise drop, another gold and green. And I'm going to go right into the seed bead that sits next to it. Actually, I'm going to go from the bottom up. Pull that thread through. Make sure it's sitting the way that you want it to be sitting, kind of off to the side there. And I'm going to add 1 more flower there. So I'm going to add 1 gold 11-0, 1 gold flower, 1 gold 11 on the exterior. Move that up and push it away just a little bit. Go back down through the flower and then through the 8-0 next to it. Not going through the 11 underneath makes it sit a little bit on an angle, which is what I wanted, and you can see that area is now pretty full. So I'm going to add some more of my green color. I want 1 more leaf there hanging out. I have plenty of those, so I'll add a gold, green leaf, green, gold to the design. Again, go right on over to the next area. And that gives me that leaf on that exterior. So here I am, I can add a little bit more on the base here if I want to. I'll add some more green beads as I come over and get ready to add another ladybug. So the great thing about this is it's really an easy way to design and to create your own. Chances are you have so many beads in your stash that you can utilize and to make this. The one thing that I think is really fun with it is those ladybugs. So if you do need those, make sure you look below the video in the description to get links to shop with us online for those. So just adding a little bit of green in there so that my poppy leaf sticks up. I'm going to get ready to add in the next of my ladybugs and try to figure out exactly where I want that ladybug to sit. I think I'll let that ladybug sit up there. So I'm coming out towards the top. I'm going to grab 1, 2, 3 15s. So through my ladybug, I'm going to put her so that her head's facing up there. 1, 2, 3 15s. Go down to about where she's coming out the bottom there. Go through one of my beads. Once again, 1, 2 15s, sharing the 15-0 before the ladybug. So through her or him, as well as the 15-0 after. I have my thread a little twisted here. I'll get that untwisted. And then I'm ready once again to create. So coming off of there, I'm going to add 2 more 15s to center it, figure out where I'm coming out of, and go back in. There we go. Now my next bug is in place. So I'm going to go around and create some more flowers around the poppy field here, adding in some more of the golds to the bottom, more of the leaves, as well as more of that just pop of my little turquoise daggers hanging out. As you're working on and finishing up your piece, you're going to notice that it's a little bit heavy, and it's so fun to work with. We are going to end up putting 2 buttons on the end of our bracelet. Now you can do a tube clasp if you want to. You can have fun and do the buttons with me. You can really make it, again, whatever you want. That's the greatest thing about a lot of these embellished pieces. Now I'm going to flip the bracelet over and come over to the back here and get ready to add my buttons. Now what I'm going to do is I am going to add them off of the 2 sides, basically. We have 4 beads sticking up here, and I'm going to add them off of bead number 1 and bead number 4. So I'm coming out of that bead, and I'm going to add 1, 2, 3 of my seed beads, go up through the back of my button, and on the other side we will add the loops at that position as well. Through the top there, I'm going to add 1 and 2 and 3 more seed beads. So down through the back of the table cup button, and I'm using the opaque red color, add 1, 2, 3 more seed beads, and we're going to sew back through that first 8-0 seed bead that our thread was coming out of. And that's going to put that cup button right on there, not sitting out too far from the project. We're going to reinforce this going up through those 3 beads, down through. And one thing to mention is if you have a spot in your bracelet that you think, oh, I should have added more there, or I'd like to add a couple more beads, this is awesome because you can do it at any time. 2 years from now, if you want to, you can even add more beads to it. Once I have that second set done, I'm going to sew down a row into the peyote stitch, pulling that to center. Then I'm going to snake along the peyote row, meaning I'm going back between the last row and the second to last row, just to get to that end bead. Once we're out the end bead here, I'm going to do the exact same thing. So I'm just going to do my 3 beads, up through my button, 3 beads, back down through. And then because I have this end here, I'm just going to simply tie off my string as I'm working with it. On the alternate side, we'll go ahead and we'll put in 2 loops of 28 seed beads coming off of that last seed bead. Once you finish up your ends, your bracelet is completed. You can see that fun little table cup button pop of red with it. And I did, again, 2 buttons because of the weight of this project. There's a lot of check glass and a lot of crystals on this fun one, but I really, really hope you enjoy. I love how the buttons match exactly with it, and they continue that poppy and beautiful garden look. Thanks again so much for joining me in creating this beautiful Poppy Fields bracelet. Remember, if you need any materials, check out the links below the video in the description. You can click on there, get all the material links, as well as shop with us online. Remember, too, to comment below any change-ups that you're making, anything that you found even on our site that you think would be a great addition, and I can't wait to see the version that you make of this bracelet. Hopefully you enjoy, and get ready for the next video.